Hey guys, it's Barrett. Welcome to Gimpy Camper. So today we're going to be talking about Valterra EZ Valves. I've been really happy with them. I'm going to tell you about putting them in the camper here. We're going to have another video with Shelburne RV because I actually had them help me install them. So we're going to go over the other video as far as installation. But this is just going to be like a first impressions. And I've been using these for a couple of months. I'm going to let you know how they're going. So over the last couple of years, we have had some progressive issues with our black and gray tank closing all the way. Mostly it's our black tank. In order to have a temporary fix for this, I did install an external Valterra valve. If you hadn't saw the video on that, I'll share it up in the corner up here. But needless to say, we were getting to where we would unscrew the cap and we'd get a little something extra popping out of there, and that got worse and worse as far as how much would actually be there, to the point that I don't think the black tank was actually closing at all. It was really hard to push that valve in, and that's going to be an inherent problem that we talk about here in a minute with cable drive valves in general. But we're going to talk to you about how we solved the problem today with the Valterra EZ Valve. I will say that we started when we used the external one out here. I have a glue-on one there now that we just talked about. I actually started with the type that screws onto the sewer attachment. I was worried that it would fall off, so I put a screw in there. I read a bunch of people talking about that. Well, my brilliant idea of where to put the screw was actually right into the gasket, so it started leaking. And that's what brought us to actually redoing the whole thing. And we have a glue-on one now. I really do prefer the glue-on one more. Number one, I can get it to extend out a little bit because I had to change a little bit of a pipe there. And number two, it doesn't rotate, it just stays in a fixed location, so I'm not worried about it rotating downward and being closer to the road. Now that external valve did fix our main problem, which was when you open that cap up, you get a couple of quarts of some brown water spraying out on you before you can attach the hose. But this come to be a problem for me. It may not be a problem for a lot of people, but it's a problem for me because sometimes we dry camp, and whenever we dry camp, occasionally we'll need to let out a little bit of gray water in one way or the other and not let out any black water. Well, because it was our black valve that was messed up, we were getting a little pooty poo out every time we took the cap off. So that was not conducive with what we needed, and I wanted to change the valves out. Now this problem worsened and worsened until it was mostly black water because, like I say, that valve wasn't closing at all. Now let's talk about the problem. After doing some research on common valve failures, I realized that a lot of failures are due to the cable systems on these cable-driven valves. These valves have very specific installation instructions which are oftentimes not installed properly at the factory. So these restrictions include a certain length of cable that should not have a bend in it at all for the very first foot or so. And then it has a maximum bend that cable is supposed to be bent at all throughout the whole installation procedure. With my valve cable handle moving very little, I felt pretty strongly that that was the problem that I was battling. I'd previously tried putting some vegetable oil in the toilet, as I'd read this can lubricate the valve sometime and cause it to work better. That didn't work, which made me further think that it was the cable that I was fighting against. I didn't have any luck with that personally. Now my theory about the cable being the problem ended up being correct, as when I removed the valve worked fine as far as the function of the valve when you took the cable out of the equation. Now let's talk about the solution. For most things, I've actually been turning more for mechanical solutions and trying to get away from electronic solutions because I feel like that's overtaking my life, and it's usually something electronic that messes up and makes you want to slam your head in the wall. However, with the valves, my thought process is that a 12-volt wire can maneuver easier through the underbelly to connect the valve with less issues than a cable valve. The electronic valves are more expensive, but I feel like they'll do a lot better job for a lot longer without the issues that are inherent with cable drive systems. Now, like I said, as far as the installation, I'm actually going to be doing a separate video with Shelburne RV about the installation process of these. This was not an easy install, mainly due to the configuration of the pipes when installed at the factory and nothing to do with the actual valves themselves. After a couple of hours filled with multiple cursing fits, I decided to let Shelburne RV install these valves for me. There was just no extra room to maneuver the valves between the two tanks. The only solution that I could come up with was to cut the pipe with a sawzall or something and then put a rubber boot on it in order to have more room. This essentially is the way that Shelburne's also ended up installing it, but it was a bear to get this thing together still, with a cost of quite a few shop labor hours that still hurts me in my hiney when I think about it. But I'm telling you, it made me so mad that it was worth it. So what I'm saying the problem is the two tanks were both like side by side mounted, and then you had a pipe that come off the inside of both of those, and then the T that went down and out of the camper. But there's only about 1 to 2 inches of regular pipe through all that, because it's all fittings and stuff, because it's so close to each other, and that made it a pain. Now, my impression so far. Now, I want to say that Valterra did send me these valves for no charge for an honest review. At first, I was really unsure how I liked the design of these valves. Essentially, it's a standard pull valve with an electronic component that actually pulls the handle back and forth. Now, Steve over at Shelburne's did point out the fact that it was a good choice for them to make this in the design, as this way, if the valve itself breaks, you can replace it with a standard valve, and those parts are going to be easier to get than more specialized parts, which may have to be ordered or hard to find if something happened. You can also manually override the electronic part of the valve, so if that fails, you can unhook it and actually manually pull it back and forth and open it up. The switches are very responsive. The valves open and close pretty quickly. I'm going to put a link to another video that I found up in the corner here and down in the description, because it actually shows with the valve not hooked up as far as how long it takes to open and close, and I was pretty impressed by that. But just by standing here and using it after the fact and not actually checking that for myself, I didn't know if it took like 30 seconds for the valve to open up, but they're pretty responsive. So every time that I flip the switch, these things have worked great so far. I'm very pleased with these valves, and I expect them to give me a dependable solution to the problem that I was having with my crappy valves. So guys, thanks for following us. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you hadn't. If you get anything out of these videos, we try to bring you information that's helpful in different products that we use, which we actually think are worth having around. I do sort out through some of the products. I've sent some stuff back that I absolutely will not recommend. And so if I do a review on it, it's usually because, well, it's always because it's something I actually believe is a good product. So just throwing that out there. There are links for these valves down in the description. It is an Amazon link. It does help the channel out a little bit if you order it. I will tell you that these electronic valves are rather expensive. They were a lot more expensive to have them put on. Hopefully your camper is set up a little different where you can get to things easier. But all in all, to me, it was still worth it. So thanks guys, see you next week.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.